All right, so now welcome to step 2. Now this week what we're going to do is we're going to talk about reharmonization. So we're going to work on reharmonizing someone to watch over me. Now what I've done is I've done this in 2 steps. The first step is we have it a little bit more easy, a little simpler, I guess, is the arrangement. Mostly just chord shells in the left hand, root 3s, root 7s in the left hand, okay? And then in step 2, or reharm 2, it's going to add in a few more tips and tricks, okay? Now, the first thing that I would suggest that you try working on, and this is a great exercise, is take all of the dominant 7th chords in whatever piece you're playing and replace them with a tritone substitution. Now, for those of you that are advanced, you can probably skip over this whole chapter and then move on to the next one, okay? Because I'm going to talk a little bit about tritone substitution again, all right? Just to make sure that everyone is up to speed on what a tritone substitution is. Now, in the second half of this lesson, that's going to be more advanced, and if you're a beginner player, that's probably going to be too advanced for you. So this is more beginner, and we'll get to advanced in a second. All right, so tritone substitution, first of all, if I just take my C7 chord here, right? The easiest way of finding the tritone substitution, well, actually, before I tell you that, there's two ways of looking at a tritone. A tritone can be an interval, all right? So from there to there is an interval of a tritone. We can also think of a tritone being a tritone substitution. Right? So we can say, oh, like, substitute it with the tritone. And there I'm thinking that the chord is not going to be a C chord, but it's going to be some type of G flat chord. Okay? So it's actually quite simple. Easiest way to find the tritone away from wherever you are is you could go to the halfway point of the octave. All right? So it's also, you can go to the 5th and go down a half step. So it's like a flatted 5th. Right, or an augmented 4th, diminished 5th, or augmented 4th. Okay, you can also just start at any note and just count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half steps. Okay, so if you think about it, there's 12 half steps in a chromatic scale. Okay, so there you go, 6 half. Okay. So a good exercise is just go ahead around and then just play any note and try and find the tritone. You go down in half steps like this. That will get relatively easy though for you. So what I would suggest you do is try doing it randomly all over the place. Right? So like don't just, move up in half steps or in whole steps. Just try randomly, okay, hit E, all right, hit A, okay, hit D, hit G flat. Okay? Now how I like to see it is the 5th, and it's just down a half step from the 5th. Because this is pretty easy to get to with those 5ths, right? So you should be able to get to all of those and then just half step down. Okay? All right, so now that you know your tritone, what you're doing in a tritone substitutions, well, think about it. Tritone substitution. You are going to substitute the chord that you are on with its tritone. Okay? So, for instance, if we go to someone to watch over me, we have, start with A flat major 7, and then here we go to that A flat 7. Even though it's in brackets, I'm still saying, okay, let's substitute that one. So, what is the tritone of A flat? Well, first of all, start on A flat, count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, half steps. It is D. So, rather than playing an A flat dominant 7th chord, I will play a D dominant 7th chord. So I have. And then here I'm just going to play just the root and 3rd. And you notice that these notes here of the melody work quite nicely on that D7. That's my 7th, my flat 9, my sharp 9, and my sharp 11. Now let's talk about that. Why is it that I can just substitute that chord and most of those notes are going to work? All right, let's go back to C7 for a minute. On a dominant 7th chord, you could basically play any of these notes. So on C7, we basically have all of these notes that we can play. We really can't play the F and the B natural, okay? But that's actually not even true either. On a B natural, we can use it in a scale, right? So the main thing is as long as you're not hanging on those notes, but now bear in mind, even though yes, this note is fine, how you combine it with other notes might sound a little bit harsh. So don't always think that just because the note should work on a chord, it's always going to sound good. No, that's where your voicing comes in. You know, if I do something like, let me see, let me try and, like that's not going to sound very good. It's not going to sound very good for a couple of reasons. One, I got a half step up here, okay? I also got a tritone right there in the middle of my voicing. So there's a lot of tension right there. But if I do things like, you know, move this around a little bit, you know, even if I were to do, yeah, that's not going to sound all that much better. See, even moving these notes around, it starts to sound a little bit better. This is where good voice leading and good voicing, again, those piano chord series, take a look at those, like your upper structure triads, etc. Okay, so anyway, back to what I was saying. We have these notes that all work on that C7 chord, right? So now let's get the tritone of C7, right? So what is the tritone of C again? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so G flat. So that means I could do a G flat dominant 7th chord. Okay, so G flat dominant 7th chord. Let's get those same notes there as well. Okay, so what do you notice here? Here's your 11, right? And here's your major 7. They're exactly the same avoid notes of C. Oh man, that's hard to mash all these down. So they're the notes that work for C. F and B are your what we would call your avoid notes. So you just would avoid playing them, like hanging on them. Like I said, you could do them in a scale, but you would avoid just like hanging on them and, you know, just playing that in the chord itself. So on G flat, same thing. There's 4 or 11 and major 7. So we see that the avoid notes are exactly the same. 4, 11 and 7, or 4 and 7, is the same as 7 and 4, okay, for C. So 4 in C becomes 7 in G flat. 7 in C becomes 4 in G flat. So what that means is that the tritone, okay, the chord that's a tritone away from whatever chord you're on, share the exact same avoid notes. Okay? Now that's important because that means that if we have avoid notes of our 11 and 7, 4 and 7 here, well, when you're writing a melody, you know, okay, if you have a C7 chord here, well, like for instance, A flat 7, you know, when Gershwin wrote this, he probably didn't put the A flat 7 in, maybe he did. Let's just say he did. Okay, so if he did, he knew, okay, well, these notes here are all going to work over an A flat dominant 7th chord. Well, guess what? If they work over A flat dominant 7th, hello, they're also going to work over that D7. The difference is that on the D7 chord, those notes are now going to start to become different tensions. Let's take a look at that. So A flat 7 here, this was the 3rd, the 5th, the 13th, and the root. Pretty basic, you know, doesn't add a lot of tension. But as soon as I make this a D down here, I change that one note from A flat down to D, now it changes the whole sound. Now this is 7, flat 9, sharp 11. This gives you that real altered sound right away. So what's really neat about the tritone substitutions, just by moving the root to a different note, tritone away, you're able to get this real tense sound immediately. Okay? So instead of doing this, now we can do this. And even though we're just moving that one note, you can hear the difference already, right? Starts to like, you can already start to hear that tension. All right, so now let me keep going on here. That's all the same. We haven't changed anything, just our shells. Now here on C, and then, oh, by the way, you can see I wrote the new chords in the box above the original chord. I kept the original chord there for you. The original chord is going to be smaller, okay, so you don't get confused. So now you have B7, okay? See how that 7th of F7, where the melody is, now becomes the what? The 3rd of B7. Okay, so then B flat, that's all the same. Oops. Now, here, that C was holding out, right? And then we went down to the B flat. I actually kind of got rid of that B flat. I could put it back in, but notice what I did. Okay? What I did here is, oh, I'm sorry. What I did here is play the wrong notes. So C, B7, got the 3rd in here, 3rd of B flat minor, and then the 3rd of A7. Okay? So what I'm doing is when I play these chords in that turnaround, if you take a look at the original melody, you see that there's not much going on here. In fact, let me just pull it up just to make sure I'm not going to change it on you here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, it was just the C. And quite honestly, that B flat is so almost unnecessary, okay? Nobody's going to remember that B flat from the melody. So basically, we get to... That's what people are listening for, is that next part. So that B flat in the first ending is, you could take that out if you wanted to. And I did here. So I kept that C because that's important. That's where my melody starts. But then I just change it. And then how I change it is I do the shell, the root and the 7th, and I add the 3rd because it helps define the sound. And then root 7, 3, root 7, 3. Now if I did put that B flat on there, listen to what happens. I could do that. I get my flat 9. If I'm going to put my flat 9 in, I'm going to add my 3rd down there because I no longer have a 3rd in the chord. So I wanted to fill out that chord, so I'd add in the 3rd down here. Okay? But the point is that when you're doing these shells and you have this dead space, think root 3 and then add the 7th in the right hand, or think root 7 in the left hand, add the 3 in the right hand. So if I show you both ways here, this would be root 3 down here. I'd add the 7th. Root 7, add the 3rd. Root 3, add the 7th. Root 7, add the 3rd. Okay? I'm just doing the original one: C minor, F7, B flat minor, E flat 7. If I do the reharm, C minor 7, I can do that. Go to the root 3 and then to the root 7. Root 7, add the 3rd. Root 7, add the 3rd. Okay? So I'm just doing that to help fill out that chord and get a little bit more sound out of it. All right, so then we go to the second ending. That's actually what I have that. I would probably just do the root 6. I wouldn't even do that G in there. In fact, I'm going to take that out right now. So usually when we have that melody note is the root of the chord. A lot of times we'll stay away from that major 7th. Obviously, you can hear it. That sounds much softer. All right, and then we go to E flat minor. And then here, instead of A flat 7, what do we do? Well, you already know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make sure you don't count the note you're starting on. That's important. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We go to D7. Nothing changes in here. Here, G7. Well, we don't go to G7. Instead, we go to D flat 7. And then C minor, and then my B7, B flat minor, then A7. Okay? So now, these chords are not always going to work. The tritone substitution is not always going to sound great. All right? The point is that you start there just to, that's kind of like the low-hanging fruit. That's a great way to just get right into some reharmonization right away. All right, so it's a fantastic way of you know, getting a different sound and coming up with some reharmonization, and you're really not changing any chords. You're just changing the root of the chord. You'll also notice that bass players will do this a lot on you. So you might be playing A flat 7, but then they end up hitting that D in there. Now the beauty of the tritone substitutions, even if I'm playing my A flat 7 chord shell and they do a D down here, it's still going to sound all right. Right? So that's the nice thing about those tritone substitutions. Now that also works in reverse. So let's say bass player's playing A flat 7 and you go to D7, it's still going to work as well. So that means that you and other players can mess around with the tritone substitutions. It's not always going to work, and you want to use your ears. And you also notice that's why a lot of times I also don't do these chord voicings, which is like, you know, like doing like these huge, you know, like all these notes in here. Instead, I'll opt for something a little bit more open, because if I put a D under there, sounds great. If I put an A flat under there, hey, sounds great too. Both of them sound good, right? So quite a bit of information in this chapter. I would suggest going back and listening to this quite a few times. But anyway, think about when you have a song, try changing those dominant 7th chords. Find the dominant 7th chords, write in the tritone substitution. Write it right above. Okay, so you see how I had A flat, put a D7 above it. In measure 4 there, I had an F7, put a B7 above it. We can also start to do other things like advanced players know. Then you could start to precede that dominant 7th chord with its minor chord. You know, you can see how that works out. It doesn't always work out. Sorry. So this would be an A minor, then the D7. There it happens to work out nicely. A minor 7 flat 5. And then here you could maybe go to like G minor. You know, you can start to mess around, and doing things like that, you start doing this to the harmony. So you start here and you start expanding it. It's really kind of cool. But start with those tritone substitutions. All right? I have other lessons too on the site. Just do a search for tritone and you'll get a lot of other information on tritone substitutions. T-R-I-T-O-N-E. Do not put the hyphen in. All right? So T-R-I-T-O-N-E. Okay? Or at least I don't think you need to put the hyphen in. But maybe, you know, try it with the hyphen as well. See what comes out. All right? Anyway, I'll see you in the next chapter.